Hello, and welcome to Slumbering Historian. In tonight's quiet journey, we'll drift back in time to explore the story of the Roman Empire. This video is made to help you relax, unwind, and gently ease into slumber while learning something interesting along the way. So whether you're lying in bed with the lights turned low, or just looking for a moment of peace before sleep, take a deep breath, let your body relax, and let your thoughts slow down. We're going to gently stroll through over 1,000 years of history, from the humble beginnings of a small village on the Tiber River to the grandeur of emperors, legions, and lost cities. There's no need to focus too hard. Just listen, breathe, and drift. Let's begin. Our story begins not with history, but with myth. According to Roman legend, the city of Rome was founded in the year 753 BCE. A long time ago, in a distant land, a princess gave birth to twin boys, Romulus and Remus. Their father was said to be Mars, the god of war, but their birth was seen as a threat, so the boys were taken away and left beside the Tiber River. But instead of perishing, the twins were discovered by a gentle creature, a she-wolf, who cared for them, fed them, and kept them warm. Eventually, a kind shepherd found the boys and raised them as his own. As they grew into men, Romulus and Remus dreamed of founding a city of their own, a place for their people to thrive. But like many siblings, they could not agree. A fight broke out, and tragically, Romulus killed Remus. With a heavy heart, Romulus became the sole founder of the new city. He named it after himself, calling it Rome. This myth was passed down through generations, not because it was factual, but because it captured how the Romans saw themselves: brave, strong, born from struggle, and touched by the gods. Beyond the myths, historians believe that Rome began as a group of small settlements built on the 7 hills near the Tiber River, in what is now modern-day Italy. These early people were farmers and shepherds, living simple lives in wooden huts with thatched roofs. The area was rich with resources and well situated for trade, near rivers, seas, and fertile land. Rome grew gradually, influenced by neighboring cultures like the Etruscans to the north and the Greeks to the south. The early Romans learned architecture, religion, and writing from these neighbors. By the 7th century BCE, Rome was ruled by a series of kings, some Roman and some Etruscan. The kings built temples, roads, and city walls. Rome was growing stronger. But the people of Rome, especially the elite families, began to resent the power of the monarchy. And so, something extraordinary happened. In the year 509 BCE, the Romans did something bold. They overthrew their king and declared that never again would one man rule them. They established a republic, a new kind of government, led not by kings, but by elected leaders, and by the Senate. The word republic comes from the Latin res publica, meaning the public thing or the common good. This was a revolutionary idea at the time. Rome was now led by consuls, 2 men chosen every year to govern together. Their power was limited, and they could each veto the other's decisions. This system was meant to prevent tyranny and to keep any one person from gaining too much control. Of course, the republic was far from perfect. Power was mostly held by the patricians, the wealthy noble families of Rome. The common people, called plebeians, had fewer rights and often struggled to be heard. But over time, the plebeians pushed for more equality. They won the right to elect their own representatives, called tribunes, who could protect them from injustice. The Roman Republic was not just a government, it was a constant negotiation between rich and poor, tradition and change, peace and war. As the Republic matured, Rome began to grow. At first it was just one city, among many in the Italian peninsula. But Rome was ambitious. It formed alliances, fought wars, and gradually brought nearby peoples under Roman rule. Rome's armies were made up of citizen soldiers who fought not just for pay, but for honor and for the promise of land and glory. One of Rome's greatest strengths was its ability to absorb the people it conquered. Instead of destroying every enemy, Rome often offered them citizenship or partial rights in exchange for loyalty. This created a sense of unity and allowed the Republic to grow stronger with each new conquest. By the 3rd century BCE, Rome had become the dominant power in Italy, but its greatest challenge was yet to come. Far across the sea was another powerful city, Carthage. Located in what is now Tunisia in North Africa, Carthage was a wealthy trading empire with a mighty navy and colonies across the western Mediterranean. Rome and Carthage clashed over control of Sicily, an island with strategic value. And so began the Punic Wars, a series of 3 brutal conflicts between the two powers. The First Punic War tested Rome's navy, but they adapted and eventually claimed victory. But the Second Punic War would become one of the most legendary wars in history. It began with a Carthaginian general whose name would echo for centuries, Hannibal. Hannibal did the unthinkable. He led an army, including war elephants, across Spain, over the Alps, and into Italy. His campaign was brilliant, devastating, and nearly broke the Roman spirit. But Rome held on. Year after year, the Romans resisted, and eventually, under the leadership of Scipio Africanus, they struck back. Carthage was defeated once more. And so, as we close the first chapter of our slumbering journey, we leave Rome on the rise, victorious over Carthage, growing in wealth, power, and pride. But within the Republic, cracks were beginning to form. Ambition, inequality, and unrest were brewing beneath the surface. In the next part of our journey, we'll meet the figures who would reshape the Republic and bring about the age of emperors. But for now, let your eyes grow heavy, let your breath soften, and let the quiet drift of history carry you into rest. We'll continue soon. Welcome back to Slumbering Historian. In the first part of our journey, we watched Rome grow from legend to kingdom to republic. We witnessed early expansion and the fierce struggle with Carthage. And now, we continue our peaceful stroll through time. The Republic has grown strong, but that strength brings new pressures. Tonight, we meet the man who would both shine and shatter the Roman Republic, Julius Caesar. So settle in, feel your body relax, and let your thoughts drift as we rejoin Rome in the final days of its republic. By the middle of the 1st century BCE, Rome was more powerful than ever. Its armies had conquered lands across Spain, North Africa, Greece, and parts of Asia. But this power came with a price. Wealth flowed into Rome, but mostly into the hands of the elite. The gap between rich and poor widened. Farmland was taken by wealthy landowners. Veterans returned home to poverty. Cities grew crowded and restless. The Senate, meant to guide the Republic, was seen by many as corrupt, self-serving, and unwilling to change. Into this moment of tension stepped a bold and charismatic man. Gaius Julius Caesar was born in 100 BCE into a noble but not especially powerful family. From a young age, Caesar was ambitious, charming, intelligent, and a gifted speaker. He served as a general, politician, and reformer, always gathering support from the plebeians, the common people. He believed the republic needed change, and he was willing to bend the rules to make it happen. In 60 BCE, Caesar formed a powerful alliance with two other leaders, Pompey the Great, a celebrated general, and Crassus, the richest man in Rome. This unofficial group was known as the First Triumvirate. Together, they controlled much of Roman politics. Soon, Caesar became consul and then was given command of Roman armies in Gaul, what is now modern-day France and Belgium. For nearly a decade, Caesar campaigned in Gaul. He led his legions through harsh winters, across rivers, and into fierce battles. His victories were stunning. He wrote detailed accounts of his campaigns, making sure the people of Rome heard of his triumphs. He became a hero to the people and a threat to the Senate. But everything changed when Crassus died and Pompey, once Caesar's ally, turned against him. The Senate, now under Pompey's influence, ordered Caesar to give up his command and return to Rome as a private citizen. But Caesar refused. In the year 49 BCE, Caesar stood with his army on the banks of a small river in northern Italy, the Rubicon. To cross that river with troops was an act of war. And yet, Caesar did. With a single step, he changed history. He crossed the Rubicon, uttering the famous words, "Alea iacta est," the die is cast. Civil war had begun. Pompey fled, and Caesar marched into Rome unopposed. The next few years were filled with battles in Italy, Greece, Egypt, and beyond. While pursuing Pompey, Caesar arrived in Egypt, where he became entangled in another conflict between the young pharaoh Ptolemy XIII and his sister, the famous Cleopatra. Caesar sided with Cleopatra, helping her reclaim the throne. The two became lovers, and she would later give birth to his child, Caesarion. Eventually, Pompey was killed, and Caesar emerged as the sole ruler of Rome. He returned to the city, and in 44 BCE, he was declared dictator for life. To many, he had saved Rome, but to others, he had destroyed the republic. Caesar began to make sweeping reforms. He expanded the Senate, launched building projects, reformed the calendar, and offered citizenship to many outside Italy. But his power made enemies. Some feared he would make himself king, something the Romans had sworn never to allow again. A group of senators calling themselves the Liberators plotted to stop him. And on the morning of March 15th, 44 BCE, the Ides of March, they struck. Caesar was stabbed 23 times on the floor of the Senate. As the story goes, his last words were not "Et tu, brute," but silence. The senators believed they had saved the republic, but instead, they opened the door to more chaos. The people mourned Caesar. Riots broke out. Two of his loyal supporters, Mark Antony and Octavian, Caesar's adopted heir, rose up to seek revenge. They, along with Lepidus, formed the Second Triumvirate and hunted down the assassins, many of whom were killed in battle or driven to suicide. But the alliance did not last. Eventually, the struggle came down to Mark Antony and Octavian. Antony allied with Cleopatra, once again drawing Rome's attention toward Egypt. But at the Battle of Actium in 31 BCE, Octavian defeated Antony and Cleopatra's forces. A year later, both Antony and Cleopatra were dead, and Octavian was now the unchallenged ruler of Rome. Octavian returned to Rome, not as a tyrant, but as a careful, clever politician. He offered to restore power to the Senate, but in reality, he kept control firmly in his hands. In 27 BCE, the Senate gave him the title Augustus, meaning the revered one, and though the Republic still existed in name, true power now rested with the emperor. This was the dawn of the Roman Empire. And now, as we pause at the edge of a new era, we leave behind the chaos of civil war and step into a time of order and peace under a single ruler. We've seen the rise of Caesar, his glory, and his fall. We've witnessed the end of the Republic and the birth of empire. In our next chapter, we'll explore the emperors of Rome, from Augustus to Nero, from golden ages to dark intrigues. But for now, rest easy. Let the noise of history fade into quiet. Let your thoughts drift as softly as the Tiber flows beneath the bridges of Rome. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, and sleep well. We'll return soon. Welcome back to Slumbering Historian. So far, we've traveled from the mythical founding of Rome through the rise of the Republic, the conquests of Caesar, and the slow, dramatic fall of the old order. And now, we enter a new chapter. Rome is no longer a republic, but an empire. A single man now holds the power once shared by many, and his name is Augustus. Let's continue our slow walk through the ancient world and let history carry you further into rest. In 27 BCE, Octavian was given a new title by the Senate, Augustus. It meant the exalted one, and though he was careful never to call himself king, he now held the power of one. Augustus ruled with quiet strength. He ended decades of civil war and brought peace to the Roman world. This period would become known as the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. It would last for over 200 years. Augustus reduced the size of the army, but made it professional and loyal. He reformed taxes, built roads and aqueducts, and beautified Rome with marble monuments. He once said, "I found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble." Under Augustus, Rome became the shining heart of the world. Though Augustus held absolute control, he ruled with care. He kept the Senate in place and made sure the people felt involved. He was more than a ruler. He was a symbol of stability. His image appeared on coins, in statues, and on public buildings. He was often depicted with the gods, or as a father of the Roman people. His rule became the model for future emperors. And when he died in 14 CE, after more than 40 years in power, he was declared a god by the Senate. His stepson and successor, Tiberius, quietly took his place. And so began a long line of emperors. The first imperial family, the Julio-Claudians, would rule Rome for nearly a century. But not all were like Augustus. After Tiberius came Caligula. At first, he was loved. He freed prisoners, gave bonuses to soldiers, and hosted grand games. But something changed. He became paranoid, violent, and unstable. Stories say he once made his horse a priest, and perhaps even planned to name it a consul. He was assassinated after just 4 years. Then came Claudius, an unlikely emperor. He walked with a limp and stuttered when he spoke. Many underestimated him, but Claudius proved to be wise and effective. He expanded the empire, including the conquest of Britain. He also improved laws and infrastructure, but he was poisoned, possibly by his wife, and replaced by her son, a young man named Nero. Nero became emperor in 54 CE. At first, he was guided by wise advisors, and the empire was stable. But over time, Nero grew self-indulgent. He fancied himself an artist, a poet, even a charioteer. In 64 CE, a great fire swept through Rome. Some believed Nero started the fire himself to clear space for a grand palace. Others say he helped lead recovery efforts. But needing someone to blame, Nero accused a new religious group, the Christians. This marked one of the first major persecutions of Christianity. Nero's reign ended in rebellion. As his enemies closed in, he took his own life, whispering the words, "What an artist dies in me." With Nero's death, the Julio-Claudian line came to an end. After Nero, Rome plunged into chaos. In the year 69 CE, 4 men claimed the throne, one after another. It was a year of civil war and rapid succession. Finally, a general named Vespasian emerged victorious. He restored order and founded a new dynasty, the Flavians. Vespasian was practical and disciplined. He began construction of a massive amphitheater, a gift to the people. We know it today as the Colosseum. After Vespasian and his son Titus, who completed the Colosseum, Rome entered a golden age. From 96 to 180 CE, 5 emperors ruled in succession, each chosen not by birth, but by merit. They were Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and Marcus Aurelius. These were the 5 good emperors. Under them, Rome reached its greatest extent. Trajan expanded the empire to its largest borders, from Britain to the Middle East. Hadrian, his successor, chose to consolidate rather than conquer. He built Hadrian's Wall in northern Britain, a boundary between the Roman world and the unknown. He also rebuilt cities, including Jerusalem. Antoninus Pius ruled peacefully for over 20 years. And then came Marcus Aurelius, philosopher, general, and stoic. He wrote meditations on wisdom and duty, even while waging war on the empire's frontiers. And so, as we pause once more, we find Rome at its peak. Vast, unified, magnificent. From the sands of Egypt to the forests of Germania, from Spain to Syria, the Roman world thrived. But the seeds of change had already been sown. In our next chapter, we'll explore the troubles that followed. Crises, invasions, reforms, and decline. But for now, let your mind be still. Let the weight of history press softly against your thoughts, not heavy, but gentle, like warm stone. Breathe deeply. Let sleep rise like the mists of the Tiber, slow, soft, and certain. Welcome once again to Slumbering Historian. In our last chapter, we reached the height of Rome's power. The 5 good emperors had ruled wisely, and the empire stretched from the deserts of Africa to the misty hills of Britain. But no empire, no matter how mighty, is without its trials. Tonight, we'll gently descend into the next chapter, one of difficulty and resilience, of reform and rebirth. Let us continue through the crisis of the 3rd century, the rise of Christianity, and the moment Rome became two. Breathe slowly. Let your body settle, and let the story flow around you, like the steady rhythm of time itself. After the death of Marcus Aurelius in 180 CE, his son Commodus took the throne. Commodus was impulsive and self-indulgent. He fancied himself a gladiator and ruled more like an entertainer than an emperor. His reign marked the end of the Golden Age. Over the next century, Rome would endure what historians call the crisis of the 3rd century. From around 235 to 284 CE, the empire teetered on the edge of collapse. There were civil wars, plagues, economic troubles, and relentless invasions. In just 50 years, more than 20 emperors came and went. Some ruled only for weeks or months. Many died violently. In the chaos, parts of the empire even broke away. The Gallic Empire in the west and the Palmyrene Empire in the east tried to go their own way. But somehow, Rome survived. And into this dark moment stepped a soldier named Diocletian. Diocletian rose through the ranks of the army and became emperor in 284 CE. He was strong, organized, and determined to restore order. He introduced reforms, bold and sweeping. He reorganized the government, stabilized the economy, and tried to control inflation. But most notably, he divided power. Diocletian created what's called the Tetrarchy, rule by 4. He shared the empire with a co-emperor, and each of them appointed a junior emperor beneath them. This was meant to prevent civil war and to allow better management of such a vast empire. He even took a rare step for a Roman ruler. He retired. In 305 CE, Diocletian stepped down and retreated to a peaceful palace in what is now Croatia. But the system he created soon collapsed into conflict again. And out of that struggle came a man named Constantine. Constantine the Great became emperor in the early 4th century. He was a skilled general and a shrewd leader. But what set Constantine apart was something spiritual. Before a decisive battle, he reportedly had a vision, a cross of light in the sky, with the words, "In this sign you will conquer." He ordered his soldiers to place the Christian symbol on their shields. He won the battle, and from that moment forward, Christianity began to rise, not in hiding, but in public. In 313 CE, Constantine issued the Edict of Milan, granting religious tolerance to Christians throughout the empire. It was a dramatic shift. A faith once punished, now protected. Later, Constantine would even convert to Christianity himself, becoming the first Roman emperor to do so. And in 325 CE, he called the Council of Nicaea, the first gathering of bishops to define Christian belief. In 330 CE, Constantine made another bold move. He founded a new capital city in the east, on the site of the ancient city of Byzantium. It was renamed Constantinople, built with Roman architecture, forums, and temples, but placed in the east. It was rich in trade and better protected from invasion. Constantinople would become one of the most important cities in the world for over 1,000 years. And while Rome, the original capital, began to fade in power, Constantinople rose in splendor. When Constantine died in 337 CE, he left behind an empire forever changed. And soon after, it would be divided in two. After Constantine's death, his sons divided the empire again. The eastern and western halves had already been drifting apart, different languages, economies, and enemies. By 395 CE, under Emperor Theodosius I, the division became official. The Western Roman Empire, based in Rome, Milan, and later Ravenna, spoke mostly Latin. The Eastern Roman Empire, centered in Constantinople, spoke Greek. Though both still called themselves Roman, their destinies would diverge. The West was weakening. The East would endure. And now, we pause at the edge of two worlds. The empire is still grand, but the signs of strain are clear. Barbarian tribes press at the borders. Rome is no longer the center of the world, but a memory of former glory. Still, there is beauty in this twilight. The city of Constantinople gleams beneath golden domes. Christian churches rise where temples once stood. And the story of Rome continues in new forms. In our next chapter, we'll follow the fall of the Western Roman Empire. We'll meet the Visigoths, the Vandals, and the last emperor in the West. But for now, breathe deeply. Let the world fall quiet around you. Let the flickering torch of history guide you, not into worry, but into rest. Good night, traveler of time. Sleep well and dream of ancient stones. Welcome back, dear listener, to Slumbering Historian. You've journeyed with us through Rome's beginnings, its glory, and its transformation. You've watched as emperors rose, and as the empire divided in two. Now, we arrive gently at the twilight of the Western Roman Empire, a time of change, of endings, but also of legacy. So, breathe deeply, close your eyes, and allow the slow unraveling of an empire to lull you into deeper rest. By the late 4th century, the Western Roman Empire faced pressures it could no longer control. Its armies were stretched thin, its economy weakened, and its leadership often unstable. But its most pressing challenge came from beyond the borders. From the forests of Germania, from the steppes of the East, came wandering tribes. Not invaders at first, but migrants. They sought land and safety from something coming behind them. Something terrifying. The Huns. The Huns were fierce horsemen from the east. Swift, skilled, and relentless. As they swept westward, they pushed other tribes ahead of them. Goths, Vandals, Alans, and others into Roman lands. This great movement of peoples is called the migration period, or the barbarian invasions. Rome struggled to respond. In 376 CE, the Visigoths were allowed to cross the Danube River into Roman territory. They were promised food and land, but instead they were exploited, starved, mistreated. Desperate and angry, the Visigoths rebelled. In 378 CE, the Emperor Valens marched out to meet the Visigoths near Adrianople in modern-day Turkey. He was overconfident and unprepared. The result was a disaster. 2/3 of the Roman army was killed, including Valens himself. It was one of the worst defeats in Roman history. And for many, it marked the beginning of the end. Rome, once invincible, had been humbled. Over the next few decades, Rome fought to hold on, but the pressure never ceased. In 410 CE, the unthinkable happened. The Visigoths, led by Alaric, marched on the Eternal City. Rome, the center of an empire for over 800 years, was sacked. Though the destruction was limited, the symbolism was immense. Rome had fallen before, but never like this. People across the empire wept. Others were stunned to silence. The poet Jerome wrote, "The city which had taken the whole world was itself taken." After the Visigoths came the Vandals. They crossed through Gaul into Spain and then into North Africa. In 439 CE, they took Carthage, one of Rome's richest provinces. And in 455 CE, they sailed across the Mediterranean and sacked Rome again. This time, with more destruction. Even the word Vandal would forever be associated with senseless ruin. Meanwhile, in Britain, Roman troops were pulled out, leaving the island to local warlords and raiders. Gaul, Spain, and other provinces slipped away too. Rome was shrinking. By the late 5th century, the Western Roman Empire was a shadow. Real power rested with military generals and foreign kings. In 476 CE, the last Roman emperor in the West, a boy named Romulus and Augustus, was deposed by a Germanic leader named Odoacer. There was no grand battle, no great ceremony, just a quiet resignation. And with that, the Western Roman Empire was no more, but it had not vanished completely. Though the empire had fallen in the West, the Eastern Roman Empire, known later as the Byzantine Empire, lived on. It preserved Roman law, Roman culture, and Roman memory. And throughout Europe, the influence of Rome remained. Its roads, its language, its architecture, even its laws lived on. The Roman Catholic Church, too, carried forward Roman traditions, from Latin prayers to basilica buildings. So even in fall, Rome left behind seeds that would grow again. In kingdoms, in cathedrals, in the very structure of the modern world. And now, our journey nears its close. But in our final chapter, we will drift eastward to Constantinople. We'll explore the survival of the Eastern Empire and the long, graceful twilight of the Byzantines. But for now, feel free to let go. Let the rise and fall of empires fade into the soft dark. You are resting now in the afterglow of centuries. Sleep well, traveler of time, and dream beneath the marble arches of memory. Welcome back, traveler, to the final chapter of our journey through the Roman Empire. We have walked through the Forum, crossed the Rubicon, and watched as Rome fell into twilight in the west. But as one flame dims, another quietly flickers on. Tonight, we turn our gaze eastward to the shining domes of Constantinople and the long life of the empire known to history as the Byzantine Empire. Let this last part of our story carry you gently into a restful and thoughtful slumber. Let the weight of time drift away as we begin. In the year 330 CE, as you may recall, Emperor Constantine the Great dedicated a new imperial capital on the site of ancient Byzantium. He called it Nova Roma, or New Rome, but over time it would be known by another name, Constantinople. Strategically placed between Europe and Asia, Constantinople grew rapidly. Its walls were high, its harbor deep, its markets rich with spices, silk, and stories from distant lands. Though the Western Empire would fall, Constantinople would stand for more than 1,000 years. It became not only the heart of the Eastern Roman Empire, but a bridge between ancient and medieval worlds. The people of Constantinople never called themselves Byzantines. They called themselves Romans. They spoke Greek, yes, and they practiced Orthodox Christianity. But in their laws, their coins, their titles, they held tight to Roman tradition. Emperors wore the purple robe of Augustus. Senators still sat in council. The Roman eagle still adorned the banners. But this was a different Rome. More spiritual, more ornate, a fusion of East and West, old and new. A city of mosaics, chants, incense, and quiet endurance. In the 6th century, the empire reached its second golden age under Justinian I. Justinian ruled with intelligence and vision. He sought to reclaim the western lands that had been lost. His brilliant general, Belisarius, led campaigns in North Africa, Italy, and Spain, briefly restoring much of the old empire. But Justinian's greatest legacy lay not on the battlefield, but in law and architecture. He commissioned the Corpus Juris Civilis, the body of civil law. It became the foundation for legal systems across Europe for centuries. And then there was the crown jewel of Constantinople, the Hagia Sophia. Built in just 5 years, the Hagia Sophia was a marvel of engineering and beauty. Its vast dome seemed to float above the worshippers like a second sky. Gold mosaics shimmered in the candlelight. It became the greatest church in Christendom for nearly 1,000 years. Visitors from the West would walk inside and say they did not know whether they were on earth or in heaven. It stood as a symbol of divine wisdom and of the empire's enduring spirit. The Byzantine Empire was not without hardship. It faced wars on many fronts against Persians, Arabs, Slavs, and later the Turks. It weathered internal strife, civil wars, and theological disputes. There were iconoclasts who destroyed religious images. There were emperors who were brilliant, and others who were blind, cruel, or short-lived. Yet through it all, the city endured. When Crusaders came, not to protect Constantinople but to plunder it in 1204, the empire fractured. The city was captured, looted, humbled. But even then, the Byzantines returned. They reclaimed their city in 1261, and for 2 more centuries held on. But all empires must one day rest. On May 29, 1453, after a long siege, Constantinople fell to the Ottoman Turks. The last emperor, Constantine XI, died in battle. Church bells rang for the final time, and the great dome of the Hagia Sophia fell silent. The Eastern Roman Empire, which had endured for more than 1,000 years after the fall of Rome, was no more. But even in that ending, there was dignity. And from the ashes, new stories began. And now we look back, not in sorrow, but in wonder. For Rome was not one thing, nor did it live in just one place. It was a city, yes, but also a system, a culture, a rhythm of life. Its roads still shape Europe's map. Its laws echo in modern courts. Its words live in our languages. Its architecture stands tall in cities and temples. And its spirit, a mixture of ambition, adaptation, and endurance, still lingers. Rome never fully vanished. It simply changed, evolved, and became a part of all that followed. And now, dear listener, we close the final chapter. You've traveled across more than 1,000 years, from the banks of the Tiber to the golden domes of Constantinople. Let the journey settle inside you, like a story remembered from long ago. You are safe now, still, and at peace. The emperors sleep, the legions have marched home, the torches flicker low. Drift now, into your own dreams. You are a traveler of time, and time now gives you rest. Good night from all the ages. Sleep well.